Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Let's head over to Mobile. Our buddy Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints, good enough to join us. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy, doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's always our pleasure. Can you tell, are there players or position groups in particular that when the Saints contingent is there, they seem to be keeping an eye on?
It kind of depends. I mean, the challenging part with that is that when the Saints show up sort of as a contingent, the defensive guys or defensive staff folks are looking at people from their position. Tight ends coaches coaches are looking at the tight ends, and the offensive line coaches are looking at the offensive line. So I would say that they're getting a really good understanding of everybody that's over there. The thing that's really interesting, though, that they're getting a lot of insight on is the fact that Phil Galliano is here as who's the associate or the assistant special teams coach for the New Orleans Saints. He's here as a special teams coach in Mobile, and so he gets a really good opportunity to work with special teams. And I know special teams isn't the sexiest thing in the world to bring to your radio show today here, Matt. But when it comes down to figuring out what kind of want these players have, how much they want to be on the field, how willing they are to do something they've never done before, he's getting a look at guys on the offensive and defensive side to figure out all of that stuff. Because sometimes it's just as much the intangibles that you learn in this type of a showcase situation than the sort of tangible things.
No, and Ross, it makes sense, man. We talk about it all the time. And it's an old adage, but it's true. So many guys make the team because of special teams. So yes, I mean, I absolutely agree that matters. Who is there from the Saints? Because Dennis Allen's not there, right? We know Jeff Ireland was yesterday. Who else is there?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different folks from the coaching staff. Some folks that I can rattle off the top of my head would be defensive coordinator Joe Woods. I know Mickey Loomis, Jeff Ireland were here. I saw Marcus Robertson, Kevin Carberry, who works with the offensive line, and then a few other coaches. Those are the ones that I can remember off the top of my head that I've run into and seen around. And so those are the guys that I'll highlight there.
When you go watch the practices the last 2 days, are there any players, regardless of whether it's someone the Saints might be interested or not, any players that catch your eye or have caught your eye?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple different ones. I'll start at the offensive line because I think that's probably most relevant to what the New Orleans Saints kind of need going into this offseason. They need to be able to improve their offensive line. I think it's great they're going out there getting a new offensive coordinator. They're looking at how to shape up that offensive system, but none of it works if the offensive line doesn't work. And so, what we're seeing here are a remarkably talented class of offensive tackles. Top guys from Oregon State, Talise Fuaga, for instance, he has been probably the best tackle here. Pretty considerably, actually, the best tackle here. I haven't seen him give up many pressures, if anything at all. He's been absolutely outstanding. He's been a stonewall over at the tackle spot. And the other team, Patrick Paul out of University of Houston, Tyler Guyton out of University of Oklahoma. All three of those guys have been really, really stout, really, really fantastic. And I'm probably going to butcher his last name, so I'm going to apologize. But Kingsley it's Sumatiyamia.
Nailed it. Let's just go with it. Nailed it. Love it. Yeah.
But the Penn State offensive tackle has also been outstanding as well. He's kind of been working sort of as the second team guy over on the American team, and he has been awesome so far this week.
What are if you were to put positions of need for the Saints in order? I agree with you on the offensive line, by the way. But if you were to put positions of need rank, where would you rank that right now, Ross?
I'd probably put that at the top. I think it's so important, and I think they have so many question marks in their offensive line. What's going to happen with Trevor Penning? I know if they still believe in him, but what's actually going to happen with him is a different conversation. The health of Ryan Ramczyk is in conversation as well. Something we'll be watching over the course of the offseason. Andrus Peat, is he going to be back? Is he not going to be back? Is he a left tackle? Is he a left guard? Is he something else? I don't know. I think he's going to find that out somewhere else, not here in New Orleans. James Hurst has to move around all the time because of injuries. They always deal with injuries on the offensive line. I think there's just so many question marks there and so many reasons to continue to invest there that I think that's got to be number one. So I would say tackles up at the top, but I don't think going away from looking at guys on the interior would be a wise decision either. I think they should be looking at basically every position on the offensive line as a spot that they could essentially add talent, whether it's starter or depth.
Where else, Ross? I mean, offensive line. What other positions do you think are should be targets for this offseason?
Yeah, I think adding athleticism off the edge is a big one that I'll be paying attention to. There's also some good defensive tackles here. The young McKinley out of Texas A&M.
Yeah.
He's been awesome. He is just this sort of stout bowling ball type of a dude, 6 foot, 330 plus pounds, and he's just compact, got a great spin move, really good athleticism. I mean, he's been awesome. Kind of reminds me actually of a Colin Saunders when we were watching him coming into the NFL, just sort of being sort of that smaller but compact player with a lot of athleticism. I think you've got some good rushers off the edge as well here in Mobile that could be of interest. It'd be really interesting to see how much the Saints continue to focus on size and maybe start to shift their focus a little bit more to speed and athleticism, especially with the success of guys like Caden Ellis and Zach Vaughn in recent years. And look, I don't rule out the idea of maybe looking at wide receiver this year either, and maybe even running back again, depending upon who's back in 2024. Like, is Jamal Williams back? Is Kendre Miller healthy? What does Alvin Kamara look like? Adding some running back talent. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there were some investments in offensive playmakers in line for New Orleans over the course of the offseason as well.
Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints. He's on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Give him a follow. I know Jeff Ireland discussed it on Tuesday, Ross, but I love your thoughts on the impact that not having an OC in place right now has on how they address this offseason, if at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I think it has an impact, but I think that the impact isn't really felt right now. The impact will be felt when that new OC is hired, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that, like, scouts have been watching these players for years, but this is their first introduction to the coaches. This is the coaches' first introduction to many and most, if not all, of these players, because the coaches have been busy coaching, right? They've been getting ready for games and all this other stuff. That's kind of been their focus. And so not having the OC in place right now just means that the first impression happens a little bit later between personally the OC and that player. But you also notice that Saints also don't have a wide receivers coach. They also don't have a running backs coach. They also don't have, they've kind of had all these staff changes. And so I think that maybe that's the spot where maybe there's not, because of not having those coaches, there aren't the coaching eyes, but the scouting eyes are still there. So you're still compiling the information. Then once the OC shows up, then you feel the impact of that, because then you kind of reconfigure how you fit in all of those scouting reports. And then you go, okay, so now how do we prioritize the talent of these players now based upon the system that OC is implementing?
You have a preference on which direction they go at offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, my guy is in terms of who's remaining is Clint Kubiak, and he would be a hire that you probably wouldn't hear news about unless it broke early. You probably wouldn't hear news about it until after the Super Bowl, just because you don't want to create a distraction for that team, or Kubiak wouldn't want to create a distraction for that team. But I think if the idea here is to advance the offense, improve the offense, perhaps even some would say modernize the offense. In that case, I would be amongst that number. Then you go with the guy that is a part of a system that has consistently done that and that has been innovative, and that is Clint Kubiak coming out of the San Francisco 49ers. And look, in 2021, he struggled in play calling when he was effectively calling and sequencing his dad's system, the Gary Kubiak system, which is a small selection of plays your team's really good at, and then the only thing that really changes is what order you run them in. That wasn't a great setup for him. If he shows up with that idea, you send him home. But then if he shows up with a Kyle Shanahan playbook, you know what I mean, and has evolved and has changed, I think we saw that in 2022 in Denver as a play caller, that he had evolved and changed. Then you get an opportunity to, get him a little bit more of the Kyle Shanahan exposure. If he brings that playbook, then you go, okay, great, we're rolling, we're ready to go here. And so for me, like, he's the one that encompasses what it is that I think New Orleans should be doing with their offense.
Ross, when you're there in Mobile, like, you're, as odd as it sounds to say in Mobile, but you're at the epicenter of the NFL. Like, every team is there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're walking the halls or you're at practice, like, what is the scuttle there about the Saints? Like, what is as best you could tell, what are people saying about the Saints, the organization, the job, the current circumstance, just everything? What are those narratives?
Yeah, I think a lot of the narratives right now are just people are very intrigued to see what they're going to do. It was such a monumental decision for this team, this organization. Like, when I talk to, coaches from other teams or scouts and NFL folks and things like that, this team hasn't changed its offensive coordinator since 2009. And so it was such a shocking thing, even though it was certainly the right decision when they made that change. And so there's a little bit of just curiosity. I wouldn't call it excitement, but just curiosity about whether or not it's going to pay off, because it's a risky thing anytime that you go to change offensive coordinators in the NFL, especially because in the last 2 years, every team has changed their offensive coordinator. And oftentimes, if you hire the right offensive coordinator, you're just hiring the right offensive coordinator for 1 year because you're about to become a head coach, more than likely, if you get it right. And so it's always just sort of a challenging thing. And so a lot of the question marks are just mostly around where are they going, what are they going to do, things like that. Not necessarily answers, but really just more so questions that you hear about them here.
Feels like that's all the more reason to hire an offensive-minded head coach, so you don't have to play that game every.
That's one of the
year.
things. Yeah, that's one of those big things. Is you get the play caller and the head coach, then you don't have to worry about that head coach becoming a head coach somewhere else,
right?
Unless you make that decision, and then you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He's Ross Jackson on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Make sure you're subscribed up on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. It's Locked On Saints, Daily Saints podcast. You want all the info. Ross's boots on the ground there in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Hey, man, we always appreciate a couple of minutes. All the best. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, bud. Take care. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.